Alright, let's continue. In the previous part, we extracted each control type into a separate component, and now we resolve them via custom service and then dynamically create them using the ngComponentOutlet directive. It leads us to the following result you can currently see. Our goal for this video is to move templates we had before to the appropriate control component and bind them properly with the form model. So let's get started with the input control. I'm going to copy the previous layout for it and paste it into the dedicated component. Cool, and now let's remove the redundant ng switch case from here and also the form control name directive. We will revert it back, this form control name directive, but it will happen a little bit later in the next video. Currently, let's focus on how we will provide the control data like control value, key, and other required things. So, usually, we provide data to Angular components using inputs. When we create components dynamically, using the component inputs becomes trickier or not possible at all. For instance, creating the component declarative way using the ngComponentOutlet directive doesn't expose any API to set or update component inputs, though it looks way cleaner and nicer than the imperative approach using the createComponent method, which eventually allows us to set inputs for dynamic components. But we are going to stick to declarative way, and let's think about another ways how we could share the data. And another way how the data can be shared between components is dependency injection. The cool thing is that ngComponentOutlet directive allows configuring the parent injector for the component that will be dynamically created, and within that custom parent injector we can provide any data we need. My idea is to create a custom pipe like let's say control injector, where the entry value for the pipe will be the control key, and additionally we will provide control data as a second parameter. And eventually then, based on the data we provided, the pipe will create a new injector and provide it as a custom parent injector for the component that is going to be created dynamically. Okay, I hope you got the idea, so let's create the pipe and implement the corresponding logic there. First, let's generate the pipe itself. For that, I will run the following Angular CLI command in my terminal, and it will generate an empty pipe for me. So let's open it and say that the value to transform has to be a control key, right? Which is just a string. And my argument is actually the control config, which has the type dynamic control. And the output of this transform method will be some injector, yeah? So let's define it here as well. Nice. Now we have to create a new injector, and we can do it by using the injector static method called create. And here we have to pass a config object where we can define providers for this injector. In Angular dependency injection, the provider might look like just a simple class name, and it will be used as a token name for this provider. Or it might be the configuration object with a property called provide, which might be basically anything like a class name or even a string. But if you deal with non-class entities, then it is good practice to use a special injection token, which I suggest you create. So somewhere here, I'm going to create a separate file, and the name of it will be control-data.token.ts, and from here I'm going to export the constant with the name control-data, whose value is a new instance of injection token that comes from the Angular core. Here we go. Here can be added also a token description, and here also we can describe the shape of data which will be provided for this token. So here I will export a new interface where I define property control that has to be a string, right? And also there will be property config that has the type of dynamic control, right? So after that, I can define the type of token data just like that. Cool. And now we can use this token in the pipe when the component injector is created. And let's go there and just import it like that. The next step is to provide data for this token. Again, because the data I need to provide is a simple object, the great choice for me will be the useValue dependency provider, and here I have to define an object which satisfies the shape that we defined earlier for the token. So it will be a control key whose value is a control key provided to the pipe. And obviously the same thing have to be done also for the config object. Cool. And yeah, in modern JavaScript, if keys and values have the same name in the object, we can simplify it to the following notation. That, in my opinion, looks way nicer. So now we have created the proper injector, and this injector will be used for the component that will be created by the ng-component-outlet directive. So each component will get its own injector with its own unique config. Oh, sorry, by the way, just noticed we have to also import this pipe into the page component. So let's go there and do that. So here we go. Also, don't forget to save it. And now if we go back to the template, you can see that the error is gone. So let's move forward. Now, because the dynamically created control components will be using any parent injector with control data provided, we can inject this control data in the target component. So let's jump to the dynamic input component and try to inject the control data token using a special function called inject. And then we just save it in the control class property. Just small remark that this inject function is a new way to inject dependencies since Angular 14. It has few benefits. Firstly, it can automatically infer the type from injection tokens, which is not possible injecting the token via constructor. And also it is shorter compared to the constructor injection. For example, this would be the equivalent notation to what we have right now, but this notation definitely looks longer, as you can see. And it also has another benefit, but you will see it a little bit later. For now, let's quickly adjust stuff in the template and update values according to the control data we just injected via Angular dependency injection. All right. Here we go. It looks like we have no errors, at least at build time. So let's check how everything works. And indeed, it works fine. The inputs were rendered properly and the proper data was used. For instance, if I investigate the email field, you can see that its type and ID, they were also properly resolved. So it looks fine. There is only the select component missing, so let's fix that. Fortunately, it can be done quite quickly. So let's go back to the VS Code and namely to the page template, and let's grab the template for the select control from here. And then we would need to paste it in the appropriate component. So far so good. And there again I have to remove also form control name directive. And now let's quickly create a control property and again inject the control data token like we did in the dynamic input component. Then the last step is to adjust the data binding in the template according to what we got from the injected control data. Okay, now it should look fine. So let's go to the browser and make sure that everything works fine and that the select control was also successfully rendered. And yes, you can see that everything works fine. Yes, currently those controls, they are unbound from the form model, but we will bind them again in the next video. So see you there.